There are some transitional elements to the Miami Dolphins roster. How are they positioned to compete in 2025? We're exploring that today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami.
No, don't do that.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're Joe Marino, or I'm Joe Marino. He's Kyle Crabbs. We're the Draft Dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're here with you daily to talk team building across the league. We're, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being here, our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
You thought that was cute until it threw you out of your intro flow for the show for what you normally do. And then you were like, oh, how do I navigate the rest of the open without my internal keywords that get me from one transition to the next? So
it was an absolute battle.
But you paid the price.
I wanted to pay homage to the great host of Locked On Dolphins, Kyle Crabbs, on Dolphins Day here on this podcast. I tried to do something cool, but fumbled through it.
What's up, Bills Mafia? I got that tomorrow. Is that gonna do the open?
Yeah, I guess.
All right, so we're doing the Dolphins here today on the show. Second place in the AFC East in 2024. Chance to come all the way back from the 2-6 start to potentially finish the year with a winning record. They lose to the Jets. Tyreek Hill pulls himself out 3 plays after halftime, and a disaster season for Miami in a lot of ways in 2024. And as a result, this is a team that went from one of the oldest rosters in football to now, I think they're tied for the 6th youngest roster in football in just one offseason. And this is less than 65% of this team's roster is back from last year. So it's nearly 40% turnover. It's a lot of new. We're going to evaluate this roster, put all the players in buckets like roster cornerstones, quality starters, sufficient level starters, quality depth, incomplete evaluations, rookies, non-roster caliber players, practice squad caliber players. And when we get to the end of doing all 32 teams, this is our next to last team in the AFC East. We will have roster power rankings for the entirety of the NFL. And I'm really interested to see where this team shakes out, Joe, because there's some players you look at and say, well, they got 3.5 combined games from Bradley Chubb and Jaelen Phillips last year. They get reasonable contributions from those guys. What's the pass rush look like? We can get 17 games of 2 for the second time in 3 years, or is the injury thing going to continue to be a thing? There's a lot of variance for this football team.
Yeah, I think if Tua is healthy, though, I think that's the most controllable piece of it in terms of if you tell me he's healthy for 17 games, where I think the Dolphins can go is most defined by that over any other variable. So I guess when I said transitional elements, that was well said based on what you said there to kind of get us into this conversation. So we're going to talk back seven, trenches, skill players. We'll start with skill players where it's still Jaylen, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. And, Kyle mentioned kind of the ending of last season didn't go, started bad, ended bad for Tyreek Hill. And we had a wrist injury or something that kind of hampered him quite a bit.
Joint practice with the Commanders in the preseason. He fell in the back of the end zone on his wrist. And you could tell
that all year.
Something and dealt with it all year. Yes.
Yeah. Assuming he's healthy, ready to go this year, he's still one of the most dangerous weapons in all of football. And I think between Tua's injuries and Tyreek's injuries, that probably took away from what has been a very productive passing combination. But, I talked last year about them needing that third guy, and boy, they found him in Jonnu Smith at tight end, who had the greatest season Miami Dolphins tight ends ever had. And I think he works so well within this Mike McDaniel offense with the screen game and how they can get him the ball in creative ways for him to maximize his yards after catch ability. It's a perfect fit. And, Jaylen Waddle, I think, is kind of slept on. He was a third on this team in receiving last year, which you don't expect, but been highly productive. He's still very dangerous. And, I think that top three in the passing game, not to mention Devon Achane, who's got a huge role catching the football. There's a lot of explosive elements. There's vertical elements. There's yards after catch elements. And I really like the arrival of Nick Westbrook-Ikine as a size player that's going to block. I know that's an important element for the Dolphins offense in general, but more verticality, more size, somebody that can win those leverage battles, help on special teams. I think this skill player group is healthy. I think it's a good group, assuming everything's on the up and up with Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I think you obviously know what the ceiling is with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle as kind of the marquee players. Malik Washington emerged as a nice, I think he's going to be a really nice role player. I have him down as an incomplete evaluation, but if you told me he's a quality depth player, I totally believe it. Westbrook-Ikine kind of in that, I'm going to keep making the Mac Hollins comparison here on AFC East Week, but it's apropos because he's played for 3/4 of the division. Yeah. Does some of the same things, right? There's a special teams element, there's a blocking element, there's a size down the field type element where Westbrook-Ikine had 9 touchdowns last year, and it's red zone and it's stuff down the field, right? And Miami trying to block with names like River Craycraft and Braxton Berrios and Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. And Tyreek Hill, by the way, he's down like 17 pounds this offseason. He was at 183.
How does he had 17 pounds to lose?
Well, when he got traded to the Dolphins, he was almost 200.
Wow.
And he said he cut the weight with the hopes of kind of getting back to his playing weight in Kansas City. So I think that probably lends itself to continuing to be balanced with their target distribution. I think the days of Tyreek getting 170 targets is probably over. But I think that realistically, when you see some of the main coverage splits of what those guys did last year, Waddle and Hill, and I think Waddle's your best bucket getter as a route runner. And he really hasn't been getting targets at the volume that, I think they've been a little unhealthily skewed, and then they were more balanced last year. But a lot of it was because they couldn't run the ball. So then teams just played you soft, and then Jonnu was the guy who was getting all the open space to catch the ball and make the plays. So as they try to recalibrate and get rebalanced, it's like when you take your car in for the alignment and they put the weights on the wheels, right? Like that's what this offseason, I think, has offensively, the retirement of Teron Armstead aside, that's what it's felt like for me with role players like Westbrook-Ikine, Alexander Mattison, Pharaoh Brown as the wide tight end type player, those players to try to get the entirety of the group realigned and recalibrated.
I'm curious to see how this running back position shakes out. Achane's very multifaceted, right? He can run the ball, but also you can move him around. You can play him in the slot and stress defenses in a variety of ways, but he's very different than the rest of the group of Wright, Ollie Gordon, a draft pick, Alexander Mattison, who that trio, the other three are very much bigger players that have more of a physical skill set compared to Achane, who's more slashing, big play potential. How do you see this shaking out at running back? I mean, even with Achane, what's his role and how does the rest of this fit together?
I would be surprised if you see Achane on as heavy of a workload as he had. I mean, 281 touches for a guy who's not the biggest guy. I don't think it's a coincidence that his touches more than doubled and he lost almost 2.5 yards per touch. I think there's a balance element with him that I think his perfect implementation is probably something along the lines of what the Saints had a lot of success with Alvin Kamara, right? So who takes that other share? And when San Francisco, when McDaniel was the run game coordinator and with Kyle Shanahan and they go back to Atlanta, all of those offenses really hummed when they had like 3 guys that got 100+ carries. So Jaylen Wright, they're obviously very invested in. He looked like he was going to have a lot of nice run based off the first month of the season when they were trying to run the ball and Austin Jackson was healthy and Alec Ingold was healthy and they had a little bit of diversity of what they were doing. And he was the guy who could kind of get downhill. And then when they went down, when Austin Jackson goes down midseason and you're replaced with a guy who's primarily pass protector, it became a lot more outside and toss, and you're stressing your skill players to win blocks, and they weren't really doing that at a very high level. Wright wasn't consistently making the reads on the perimeter the way that he needed to, and it kind of felt like it cut him off from having a snap share. So when we're going to get to the offensive line here in just a minute, the ways that they've potentially diversified what they can do running the ball, I think you'll see Wright have a role, and then either Madison, who has a very high success rate as far as short yardage opportunities. Now he's going to average 3.5 yards a carry, but if you need 2, he's going to get 2.5. Right? That's kind of what the Madison role is. He's on a minimum contract. Does he beat out Ollie Gordon? Do they keep both guys? Ollie Gordon, obviously, there's a ceiling based off of what he was at Oklahoma State in 23. Be interesting to see how I think the 3-4 spot shakes out.
Still a lot of potent weapons here for the Miami Dolphins offense with some new younger guys sprinkled in. We're going to talk offensive line for the Miami Dolphins. Always a conversation. Shaping up pretty good, and we'll do defense as well. So folks, be sure to stick with us. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Folks, the insights are surprising. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Plus, it's super convenient. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for your long-term goals. And it's easy to collaborate. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track all those shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Really excited to get into the offensive line group with you. Tron Armstead's retirement is kind of been the headline for everything, and it's made the Patrick Paul draft choice from 2024 in the second round, which was a bit surprising at the time based off you perceived the team to have some needs. It's some good foresight on their front, especially with how the tackle class this year ended up shaking out. And you probably would have had one swing at the bat at a tackle based on where you were picking with how everything fell. So Patrick Paul is going to assume the left tackle spot. James Daniels coming in free agency. It's kind of to be determined who's playing what spot at the 2 guard spots between him and rookie Jonas Avaanea. But Aaron Brewer at center, Austin Jackson back healthy at right tackle. He's been a full go in OTAs, and then I think he got like cleated or something at mini camp, and then they held him out, and everybody freaked out that Austin Jackson was hurt again, but it's no big deal. They signed Larry Borman for agency, who I think will be a pretty good scheme fit within what this offense does. Bring back Lee Meichenberg, kind of running out of gas. I think they would certainly benefit from one more name. Kind of feels like they're waiting to see how some dollars shake out moving on from Ramsey before they get back into their summer free agent shopping list.
I feel as good about this group for Miami as I have any recently. Probably better. I actually like this group a lot more. With particularly the interior. Brewer, kind of just like Jonnu Smith, I think found the perfect spot to be the best version of himself with the range that he offers. Unbelievable with how he gets out in space and how he can really just add to this scheme. I love Savianaya. He was like one of my favorite prospects coming out. I think he adds major physicality and power to this group. And then James Daniels, I mean, he's coming off of an Achilles, but he's been a good starter in the league for a while. I think Patrick Paul is obviously a wild card. I think it's healthy for him that he got some run last year, can build
about
on
300
that.
snaps.
Yeah, yep. That's helpful as he, this is why they drafted him, right? Like, this is what you do. You got a guy on the way out, you draft somebody, got a year of time. Now let's go do it. And then obviously Austin Jackson, I think we learned a lot about the value of Austin Jackson last year when he was not in the lineup and how the run game in particular looked with and without him. I know that Liam Eichenberg's not a very popular player amongst Dolphins fans. Who else has got a guy that's got, what is he at 3,300 snaps in his career?
He can play 5 spots, none of them
Right,
particularly well, but he can play 5 spots. And there's
And-
value there for that
right.
on a guy that he's on a veteran salary benefit contract.
Right.
So he's getting like $2 million in cash, but he only counts for like veteran minimum.
I think as your swing interior player, that's fine. Like he's fine for that. You're not going to have a guy that's going to come in with that type of knowledge of the system. Hopefully he doesn't have to play a ton, but 3,300 snaps or whatever he has is not nothing. I think Larry Borum, elevates their depth. I think at tackle and guard if they needed to play him at guard. So
he can play guard. Yep.
I think our 1 through 7 here looks as good as it has in a while for me with the Dolphins.
So for Borum, I kind of see Borum similar to what the perception was of Brewer leaving Tennessee. I'm not saying he's going to be anywhere as near of good of a player, but you're talking about a 330-pound guy with some linear explosiveness and range who blocked for Justin Fields and Caleb Williams in pass protection. Like,
boy, it's going to be – this is drastically different.
What do you think's going to happen, right?
Tua's going to get the ball out in 2 seconds. Those guys get it out in 4.5, you know?
Right. So, and that was the thing with Brewers. Oh, good luck. He can't pass pro. Well, life's a little different when you're play action oriented. And the Dolphins spammed the screen game numbers are off the charts for him last year because they couldn't. It was their answer to when Jackson went down. Kendall Lamb was their swing tackle, and he's 35 years old with like a herniated disc. Like he couldn't move. You could get no stretch on the point of attack. So their answer was, instead of just trying to run the ball, we're just going to spam the perimeter screen game. And I think that kind of skewed the manufactured throws elements of the offense a little bit. But the thing that pops to me the most, Joe, is the guys that are replacing the guys who started last year. I would take the 23 line if it was healthy over this year's line, for what it's worth, with Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams, Rob Hunt as the interior tree.
Well, those guys are healthy, right?
Right. The Dolphins got one game of those guys all overlapping the entirety of 23. James Daniels is a 325-pound guard with athleticism. Jonah is a 330-pound offensive lineman with athleticism. Larry Borum's a 330-pound guy with athleticism, replacing UDFA and Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg. I think it makes what Brewer did all that much more impressive relative to, they were replacement level players who, you finally got healthy guard play in Miami under Mike McDaniel, and it was guys that were replacement level players, right? Like, it made your life a little bit harder. So I think it signals the mass and the point A to point B displacement potential of the group. I think signals a tonality change for what they're going to try to do running the ball this year.
A little more inside zone, a little more duo for Miami Dolphins this year.
That Sean McVay learned that lesson the hard way, right? When Vic Fangio kind of loaded up the line of scrimmage, and then Belichick put 6 birds on a fence at the line of scrimmage and flooded every gap in the Super Bowl, and they just couldn't run the ball. And so I guess we better go get some guys to run power and pull some guards around and knock you around a little bit.
All right.
Defensive line?
Yeah, we can
set the table real quick.
We'll set the table real quick. We'll get more into it here in just a moment. But I think the story here is what's going on the edge. Chop Robinson looks like an absolute hit of a first-round pick last year to go with Bradley Chubb and Jaelen Phillips, who, the last year and a half for these guys has been injuries. Both should be ready to go this year. I mean, in particular, Chubb, who missed all of last season. And then Jaelen Phillips coming back. Like, if those guys are healthy, that's going to be one of the best edge trios in the league, especially with just like the complementary skill sets where I think they all win in different ways. Yeah. And I think that's exciting for the different ways that Miami can attack the pocket. And I believe a lot in Coach Weaver and how he can dial it up. And that doesn't even get into like Zach Sealer, who's probably going to play a lot of 5-tech. But I think this edge group has a lot of potential. Of course, not without questions, though.
So in the same light in which we've referred to the Jets and the Patriots earlier this week with guys that had to play elevated opportunities because of injuries on their offensive lines, I think that's where you look at a name like Quentin Bell for the Dolphins, and probably you could Benito Jones to a little bit of a lesser degree because he was kind of brought in with an understanding that he was going to have a role in the rotation. But Quentin Bell, practice squad guy, late convert to the defensive side of the ball, played like 250 snaps last year and flashed in training camp. And then Phillips goes down and Tyus Bowser goes down and he's got to play a little bit. And I think he's become a nice, as your fourth edge, potentially. We'll see what Muhammad Kamara, if he has anything to say about it, as a 5th round draft pick from last year. That's the call out I would have as guy who had elevated role because of injuries last year, that now if the group is healthy, you're looking at where he's at on the depth chart and say, hey, I think he's going to be a really nice role player for you.
I'm not sleeping on Mo Kamara. I'm ready. That's a good little battle there between those two players, and obviously potentially some hedges based on what happens with some of those other guys. So, all right, we'll get further into this defensive line, interior, of course, the back seven as well here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us.
Real quick, before I forget, how'd you grade the offensive line?
Patrick Paul, incomplete. I gave Daniels and Brewer a quality starter.
Correct, me too.
Savianaya is a rookie. I gave Austin Jackson sufficient starter.
Okay, so we have it graded exactly the same, and then I have Eichenberg and Borum as quality depth.
Same here.
Players. Okay. On the edge, I have... I went back and did for Substack for Touchdown Miami. I did do Bradley Chubb and ended up going about an hour for his 23 season. And I think you hear his voice, you hear his messaging, you watch the tape. I put Bradley Chubb down as a cornerstone player. He had 70 pressures in 16 games in 23. So that's how I graded him. Phillips I have as a quality starter. Chop I have as a incomplete evaluation, teetering between sufficient and quality starter right now. If he takes another leap in year 2, which you could very easily talk yourself into that happening, I think he can get a conversation of continuing to elevate his profile. But based off what we know right now, that's how I have the top 3 guys on the edge.
If I put Jared Verse in a quality starter bucket, I'm putting Chop Robinson in a quality starter bucket as well.
There you
go. Who had a lot less to work with on this defensive line than Verse did last year. So and part of some of these younger guys as well, it's like I am leaning into my perception of them as prospects, and I want to try to
this is not a completely objective process, right?
No,
there is subjectivity that goes with how we rate all the players.
Yes. So all of that combined, I went ahead and put Chop as a quality starter. I did the same for Chubb and Phillips in the quality starter bucket, and then Kamara's incomplete.
Completely overhauled the defensive interior, 3 draft choices, and then a couple of a waiver claim in Matthew Butler that I think could maybe make this roster.
That one felt real random. Like I was like, why is he available? Well,
they had the regime change, right?
Right. Yeah.
So this guy was a 5th round pick out of Tennessee and had some sparing opportunities to play, but you knew he was a developmental guy. When we got out of the draft, I looked at this group and said, you probably need a 200 to 300 snap Brent Urban type 5-tech player for the rotation. I think Matt Dickerson has the inside track because he was on the team last year and has some nice power, but is a pretty low ceiling player. But Butler as a waiver claim is like a nice hedge against that. And then Ben Stilley started in Miami and they got claimed off the practice squad and signed in Cleveland. And then went to Arizona and played like 300 snaps the last 2 years.
I'm more excited about Butler than I am Dickerson. Well, I mean, obviously
that's where I'm at too.
Yeah.
I think Butler was a nice waiver ad.
Yeah. Very worthwhile. You mentioned the draft picks. Kenneth Grant, not getting to 30, is he, Kyle? He's not
getting the 40, 48 or whatever it was. Like he was getting in some of the simulators too. Yeah,
what is going on here?
Didn't make it to 48 or 30.
Yeah, I remember this with Jack Campbell. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks. Jordan Phillips. Jordan Phillips, not the former Jordan Phillips, and Zeke Biggers, 3 Three tanks added here, especially Grant and Phillips. I think highly of both of those players. Phillips is one of my favorite defensive tackle prospects coming out. Just a ball of muscle, man. I think he's going to be a nice fit. And then Benito Jones has kind of been like an experienced A-gap defender, which I think is a nice player to have with these other guys. Obviously,
all of these guys have the same mirror as what the interior offensive line adds are, which is they've got mass and linear twitch.
Yeah, can tell a trend there. And like, of course, Zach Sealer is still here, and he's a baller. And the thing about Zach Sealer is, he's probably the guy that has the biggest claim right now to getting that contract bump.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that's at or where it's going, but I mean, Zach Sealer has quietly been one of the most impactful defensive linemen in the league over the last several years.
I think Zach's scheduled to make like, is it $8 million this year?
It's about, I mean, honestly, dude, if that was 2.5 times that, you'd probably think that was probably more appropriate.
It's $7.85 million in cash this year.
What was that initial extension he signed?
It was 3 for $30.75 in 20.
It didn't pass the sniff test then.
Well, they were sitting here negotiating with Wilkins, trying to get the Wilkins deal done, and Wilkins said, "No thanks. I know I'm gonna ball out if I bet on myself." So they said, "Hey Zach, you want to get a deal done?" They did the same thing with Rob Hunt and Austin Jackson, where they offered Rob Hunt first, and then they went to Austin and said, "Hey, do you want the contract?" And then Austin signed, and then Rob Hunt left, and then both those guys left. They got supersized $20+ million year contract. So trying to find the surplus value contracts. We'll see. There's an outside chance Zach gets a new deal before the start of the season. At linebacker, there's a really interesting group, Joe, for the depth for me. That's what surprises me about this group. We're going to talk about a non-existent secondary from a exciting players perspective, because there's a whole bunch of unknown with Jalen Ramsey on the out. But Jordan Brooks was a baller last year. He played outstanding. I don't care what his PFF grades are, what the metrics say. He gets the Tremaine Edmonds treatment in Buffalo when he was playing with McDermott, and the degree of difficulty of the assignments you wouldn't give most linebackers. And that's the thing that stands out to me for Brooks, in the same way that I hope when I invoke the name Tremaine Edmonds, nobody thinks a 1-for-1 for like the body type and the skill set, but just the amount of ground that they're asked to cover and where they line up versus where they go, and the conflicts that they're put in as a result of that, and how you sort that. They bring back Tyrell Dotson, who was a waiver claim from last year. It's a mid-season claim from Seattle, made a couple of big plays for him on defense. But then they went out and got a couple of role-specific depth players to overhaul the entirety of the room, with KJ Britt as a plug and Willie Gay as a pass rusher, will see ball, chase ball kind of guy.
Willie Gay, one of the best spy mirror type backers in the league. There might be a mobile quarterback with that they had in mind, perhaps, when they went after Willie Gay. I didn't know that there was polarizing thoughts on Jordan Brooks. He's a quality starter for me, and it was week 2 against the Bills when he carried Curtis Samuel on a wheel route.
Yeah.
And broke up a pass in the end zone. I'm like,
I
mean, I watched this develop.
He's wearing 20, so you're like, oh, this is a big safety. Oh,
but I knew he was Brooks, right? Because I got myself familiar, and I was like, I pre-snap, I saw like Josh Allen did. I said, that's Curtis Samuel on a wheel route against a linebacker covering a vertical, and like go throw a touchdown pass. I'm like, okay, Jordan Brooks had other intentions there. So yeah, he's a heck of a coverage backer. And obviously that play doesn't define everything, but he shows up all the time in coverage. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good linebacker group. I have Brooks as a quality starter. I have Dotson as a sufficient starter. I have Gay and Britt as quality depth players. Yeah,
that's how I had it as well.
That's nice. It's a nice quartet.
All right, so we got about 4 minutes to get as much into this secondary as we can. Now,
you tell us what the heck's going on here.
We still don't know who the other starter is at corner. So let's start at safety, where Ifitu Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, guys that have had a couple of years under their belt, looking to take the next step. Davis has had big-time ball production and limited opportunities. Melifonwu, former corner in college. He's going to be the safety weapon, move-around type player. And then between Elijah Campbell, who's a career special teams guy who's kind of dabbled in some defense stuff, and a couple of late round picks in Dante Trader and Patrick McMorris. McMorris out of Cal in 24, Trader out of Maryland in 25, both day 3 picks. Those guys are the Geno Stone, and I put Elijah Campbell. You go to this Baltimore defense and Mike McDonald and Geno Stone, that role, those guys can fill that role as really good tacklers who can play on the second level. They can play a little bit in the nickel, but don't put them in man coverage against wide receivers. And I think the competition for who's the safety 3 and does one of those young guys kind of elevate throughout the course of the season and maybe seize a primary role as one of the top 2 guys, that's kind of how I expect that group to play out.
I think Davis and Melifonwu have both had their moments, but haven't been able to like lock down roles for the teams that drafted them. So I'm curious to see how this comes together.
I'm both as quality depth players. If Melifonwu could stay healthy, I think he would have a pretty good shot at sufficient level starter.
I have them both as quality depth players as well, and they're still young with ceiling. That's the thing; they're both athletic. So, but a lot to prove.
Yep. Jalen Ramsey on the outs.
Never heard of him.
Who? Yeah. Jalen Ramsey on the outs. Kader Kohu, presumed to be the top corner. Whether they're in base, he's going to be one of the outside guys. When they're in 3 corners, he'll probably kick inside and play nickel. It's where he got his start as a UDFA, but I have him down as a sufficient level starter. I thought he really came into his own in the back half of the year last year. Outside of that, incomplete evaluation, Cam Smith. Quality depth veteran, Artie Burns, who long time in the league, played in the system last year in Seattle, got some run in week 18, but I think you'd be reckless to put too much on his plate. And then a whole bunch of incomplete evaluation guys like Storm Duck. I know I mentioned Cam Smith, Ethan Bonner, BJ Adams, a UDFA this year out of UCF that some people liked. They've made a lot of overtures to veteran corners. They're going to sign one. They're going to sign a starting corner. It's a question of whether it's Rasul Douglas or Asante Samuel Jr. or Stephon Gilmore. They've shown publicly, privately interest and or made offers to all 3 of those names. So
they need
somebody's going to sign. It's a question of who it is.
Yeah, and I think for those players, they're going to get a chance to start, right? That's going to be
play. Yep.
Yeah, you're going to play every snap probably. So that'll be an important add. I think just in general, the secondary is littered with questions that will help stabilize things. But I mean, the X factor here is this front and the pass rush that they can get from Chop and Phillips and Chubb and
It could be night and day versus what it was with Emmanuel Agba and Tyus Bowser. And Quentin Bell's a nice role player, but Quentin Bell is your potentially second primary pass rusher.
Yeah.
Outside of Chop Robinson was a tough way to make a living last year.
Yeah, and if Tua's healthy and the stress that the offense can put on you, I mean, that's their formula.
A lot of ifs.
Yeah.
A lot of ifs. But there's a pathway in which it works, and there's a pathway in which it doesn't. And I think that's what makes them one of the harder teams to kind of project predictively how it's going to play out, because there's a lot of variance in the outcomes depending on a lot of variables that you could flip a coin and it could break one way or another.
Real quick, how about the upgrade of punter and long snapper?
Ooh, Joe Cardona over Blake Ferguson and Ryan Stonehouse over Jake Bailey has me feeling some things.
That's very exciting. I'll tell you, we should have started there for sure. And
Sanders,
a heck of a season, back to a 90% kicker, man. Was he 12 of 14 from beyond 50?
3 years of like bottom 4 or 5 EPA on special teams in a row. They finally made the coordinator change. They finally bring some new names in here. I'm fired up. We hope you are fired up to talk about the Bills tomorrow. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, we are out of here. Appreciate you guys checking the show. We'll talk to you all again soon.